Have you ever heard about Adonijah in the Bible? He was one of King David's sons and became known for trying to take the throne from his own father. This is a little discussed story, but it is full of lessons. Adonijah was a handsome, charismatic, and popular prince. He had everything to gain prestige, but he made wrong choices. He grew up surrounded by riches and was never corrected. Because of this, he believed that the throne of Israel was his by right. But there was one detail. God had already chosen Solomon, his younger brother, to reign. Driven by ambition, Adonijah decided to act on his own, confronting his father's authority and God's plan. What seemed like a perfect strategy ended up turning into a tragedy. Do you want to know how this story ended? Then get ready, because in this video, we are going to discover the true story of Adonijah, the son of David, who tried to steal the crown. Adonijah was the fourth son of King David, born to Haggith, one of the king's wives. His name appears prominently in the book of 1 Kings, chapter 1, precisely at the moment when the succession to the throne became urgent. David was already old and sick, which opened space for internal disputes and much ambition among those who dreamed of the crown. It was in this setting that Adonijah stood out, not for obedience, but for his thirst for power. The Bible describes Adonijah as a man of great beauty and striking presence. In 1 Kings chapter 1 verse 6, we read that he was very handsome in appearance. His looks, combined with his charisma and princely posture, attracted the attention of both the people and the nobles of the court. Moreover, Adonijah was one of David's oldest living sons, and for that reason he believed he had the natural right to inherit the throne. After the death of Absalom, who had rebelled against his father and died in battle, 2 Samuel chapter 18 verses 9 to 15, Adonijah saw the opportunity to present himself as the legitimate successor. But there was a problem. David had not chosen him. The biblical text itself highlights a detail about his upbringing. In 1 Kings chapter 1 verse 6 it is written, "And his father had never rebuked him by asking, 'Why have you done so?'" This verse shows that David, even though he was a man after God's own heart, failed to correct Adonijah. He grew up surrounded by privileges, without discipline and without clear boundaries. This absence of guidance shaped in him a proud character, which looked like confidence, but in truth concealed arrogance. Adonijah believed that everything was within his reach: the title of prince, the admiration of the people, and the luxuries of the palace. This made him think that the throne would automatically be his. However, the choice of a king in Israel did not depend only on tradition or human will, but on God's decision. And at this point, Adonijah was mistaken because he ignored that only the Lord had authority to choose who would govern his people. Adonijah's mistake began when he allowed his own will to speak louder. Instead of seeking God's direction or respecting David's decision, he began to act as if he were already the king. His goal was not only to lead, but to take the throne without God's blessing and without his father's permission. Ambition blinded him, and when the heart is filled with pride and rebellion, even good qualities, such as beauty, charm, or intelligence, can become traps. This phase of Adonijah's life shows how even inside a palace someone can get lost if the heart is not dealt with. The lack of discipline combined with ambition became a danger to him. Adonijah wanted to rule, but he had not yet learned to serve. He desired authority, but he did not accept being under it. His posture already showed what would come later. The example of Adonijah makes us understand that when a child or young person grows up without limits and without correction, he can become an adult unable to listen to advice, recognize mistakes, or wait for God's timing. Deep down, what moved Adonijah was not the desire to serve the people of Israel, but the thirst for power. For him, the throne did not mean responsibility, but personal conquest. And as we will see in the next events, this choice ended up putting Adonijah against God's will and against the leadership that he himself had established. When King David was already old, weak, and almost never left his chambers, Adonijah, his fourth son, saw in that the chance to fulfill the dream he carried in his heart, to take the throne of Israel. He did not ask for his father's blessing, nor did he seek God's direction. He decided to act on his own, guided only by ambition. Adonijah began to present himself as king. He ordered chariots and horses to be prepared and placed 50 men to run ahead of him. It was a spectacle designed to impress. Seeing that, the people understood the message. Here is the new king. Those men were not just bodyguards, but part of a staged performance meant to give weight and authority to his image. But Adonijah did not act alone. He was skillful in winning allies and knew that for his plan to succeed, he needed the support of influential people. He managed to bring to his side two very important figures, Joab, commander of David's army, and Abiathar, the priest. Joab was an experienced warrior, respected and feared by all who had accompanied David since the time he fled from Saul. Abiathar, in turn, came from a priestly lineage and represented spiritual authority before the nation. With those two at his side, Adonijah did not have only military support, but also a sense of religious legitimacy. It was a bold move, carefully planned, showing how far he was willing to go to appear as the true heir to the throne. Adonijah organized a great banquet in En Rogel, a strategic place to the south of Jerusalem, near the spring of Rogel. There, he gathered his closest supporters. He invited his brothers, except Solomon, and several men of Judah who were on his side. That gathering was not just a feast, but a public declaration. Before everyone, he presented himself as the new king, even while David was still alive. That act was not only disobedience, but a direct attempt to take the throne. Adonijah completely ignored God's promise and David's word that Solomon would be the heir. He did not seek the Lord's direction, nor did he listen to any prophetic guidance. His plan was based only on ambition, political alliances, and an appearance of power. But there was a revealing detail. Adonijah left out very important people. The prophet Nathan, Benaiah, commander of the royal guard, David's mighty warriors, and most importantly, Solomon, were not invited. That exclusion showed that he knew his attitude was not legitimate. He avoided calling those who could confront him or remind him of God's true will. This episode shows the danger of seeking glory without submitting to God. Adonijah preferred shortcuts, driven by vanity and surrounded only by people who agreed with him. Even with strong allies at his side, he was walking on a dangerous path, because his foundation was not divine direction, but merely human pride. When he learned of Adonijah's boldness in declaring himself king, the prophet Nathan realized that he needed to act without delay. The situation was serious. David was still alive, but already very weak and confined to his chambers. The king's silence until then gave the impression that nothing would be done, and this could open the way for Adonijah to take the throne illegitimately. Nathan knew that if he did not intervene, God's promise about Solomon could be forgotten. With wisdom, he sought Bathsheba, Solomon's mother. She was a firm and intelligent woman and knew well the word given by David that her son would reign after him. Nathan advised her to go to the king to remind him of this promise and to reveal everything that Adonijah had been doing in secret. The idea was simple and direct: to place the truth before David, awaken his conscience, and ensure that God's will would be fulfilled. Then Bathsheba entered the royal chambers. The king was lying down, weakened, being cared for by Abishag, the young Shunammite. With courage she spoke. "My lord, you swore to your servant that Solomon would be king after you. But Adonijah is already reigning and you do not even know it." She then explained that Adonijah had gathered Joab, Abiathar, and other influential men, holding a great banquet at En Rogel, as if he were already the new king. Bathsheba also pointed out the danger that she and Solomon faced if Adonijah consolidated his position on the throne. To him, they would both be a direct threat to power and would likely be eliminated. Nathan confirmed everything Bathsheba had said and made clear the gravity of the situation. His words awakened in David the memory of the promise made to Solomon. Even weakened by age, the king showed that he still had authority and full clarity of mind. Without wasting time, he gathered trusted men, the priest Zadok, the prophet Nathan, and Benaiah son of Jehoiada, and gave a decisive order. Solomon should be taken to Gihon, mounted on the royal mule, the official symbol of kingship, and there he should be anointed as king of Israel. The order was carried out exactly as David had determined. Solomon was led with a solemn procession to Gihon. Zadok took the horn with the sacred oil, and anointed him as king before everyone. Then the trumpet sounded, and the people began to shout with enthusiasm, "Long live King Solomon!" The entire city of Jerusalem was filled with joy. The streets resounded, and the sound of the celebrations echoed throughout the city. It was a moment of confirmation of God's will and of the restoration of order in the kingdom. Meanwhile, at Enrogel, Adonijah and his guests were still at the banquet. But when a messenger brought the news that David had ordered Solomon's anointing, that the people had celebrated, and that the new king was already seated on the throne, the atmosphere changed completely. The feast turned into despair. The guests, seized with fear of being punished for supporting an attempted coup, rose quickly and scattered in haste. Adonijah's plan was crumbling before his eyes. He who only moments earlier saw himself as king was now alone, frightened and fearing for his own life. When Adonijah realized that he had lost the support of his allies and also the chance to be king, he was overcome with fear. He knew that, under the laws of the kingdom, his attitude could be seen as treason. To attempt to proclaim himself king while David was still alive and without God's blessing was a direct attack on his father's authority and on the Lord's will. Now that Solomon had been anointed and recognized as king of Israel, it was natural to think that he might order Adonijah's execution. Desperate, Adonijah ran to the most sacred place he knew, the tabernacle. There, he clung to the horns of the altar of the Lord, pleading for his life. This gesture symbolized a cry for divine protection, as if saying, "Do not kill me, for I entrust my life into the hands of the Lord." When the news reached Solomon, he was already taking his position as king. He could have been harsh and ordered him to be killed, but he chose to act with wisdom. He commanded that Adonijah be brought to him and declared that he would spare his life, but with one condition. He would have to conduct himself with dignity and prove to be an honest man from that moment on. Thus Adonijah was brought before the new king, not as a prince aspiring to the throne, but as someone ashamed of his own ambition. Solomon made it very clear, "If you show yourself a worthy man, not one hair of your head will fall to the ground, but if wickedness is found in you, you shall die." 1 Kings chapter 1, verse 52. It was an act of mercy, but also of firmness, showing that the new king would govern with justice. Adonijah's life was now in his own hands. To remain alive, it was enough for him to live in obedience and no longer try to exalt himself or manipulate power. After the judgment, Solomon sent him back to his house. He left alive but carrying the mark of his failed attempt to usurp the throne. The gesture of the new king showed that Israel would be governed with wisdom and discernment, and not with vengeance. Solomon made it clear that it was possible to lead with both firmness and compassion, maintaining order without immediately resorting to the sword. This episode not only marked the end of Adonijah's first attempt, but also showed the contrast between two types of leadership, one driven by ambition and the other founded on justice and the fear of God. Adonijah, even though spared, had lost his honor and the trust of the people. Meanwhile, Solomon was beginning his reign by proving that he would govern with prudence and faithfulness to the Lord. But although he had received mercy, Adonijah did not truly repent. Ambition still burned within him. His silence was only an appearance, because the desire to reign had not died. With the death of King David, the throne was officially in Solomon's hands. It was the beginning of a new phase for Israel, a time to consolidate alliances, establish justice and secure peace. And it was in this setting that Adonijah decided to act again, this time in a more discreet and even more dangerous way. Knowing that a new open attempt to take the throne would not be tolerated, Adonijah devised a more subtle plan. He approached Bathsheba, Solomon's mother, asking her to intercede for him before the king. His request seemed innocent. He wanted to marry Abishag the Shunammite, the young woman who had cared for King David in his last days. Abishag was known for her beauty and had served the elderly king very closely, lying beside him to keep him warm, although there had never been intimacy between them. 1 Kings chapter 1, verses 3 and 4. However, in that culture, any woman who had served the king in such a way was considered part of the royal harem. Therefore, marrying Abishag was not a simple matrimonial request, but a gesture loaded with political significance. In practice, it could be interpreted as an attempt to claim the throne. Adonijah spoke to Bathsheba in a humble tone. "You know that the kingdom was mine, and that all Israel expected me to reign. But the kingdom has passed to my brother, for the Lord gave it to him. Now I ask only one thing of you, do not refuse me. Speak to King Solomon, for I know he will not refuse you, and ask him to give me Abishag the Shunammite as wife." 1 Kings chapter 2, verses 15 and 17. These words made clear what still dominated his heart. Adonijah had never accepted God's choice. His request, seemingly simple, was in fact a direct affront to Solomon's throne. Bathsheba, perhaps without realizing the full gravity, brought the request to her son, the king. When Bathsheba took Adonijah's request to Solomon, the king immediately understood what it meant. It was not just a desire for marriage, but a maneuver to try once again to get close to the throne. Marrying Abishag would give Adonijah a symbolic connection to the former king, which could endanger the stability of the kingdom and the authority that God had given Solomon. Therefore, the young king replied firmly, "Why do you ask Abishag the Shunammite as wife for Adonijah? Then ask the kingdom for him as well." 1 Kings chapter 2, verse 22. He knew that such a request concealed a greater danger, a new threat of rebellion. Solomon understood that his mission was to protect Israel, honor the covenant with God, and keep the throne secure. There would be no peace while Adonijah's ambition continued. Therefore he swore by the Lord that such an attitude would cost his brother's life. Then he commanded Benaiah son of Jehoiada to carry out the sentence. And so, on that same day, Adonijah was killed. 1 Kings chapter 2, verse 25. That was the sad end of Adonijah, a man of noble appearance but who let pride and ambition guide his steps. His life, which could have been marked by faithfulness and honor, ended in downfall because he tried to take for himself a power that God had not given him. His story is a strong lesson. It is the Lord who chooses kings and brings down the proud. Any disobedience to his will, even when disguised, brings consequences. The path of Adonijah is a warning for all who seek power at any cost. Beauty, influence, or strength are not enough to gain the throne, only God's choice. Humility, submission, and sincere repentance are the true ways that lead to life and peace. And you? Did you already know the story of Adonijah, the son of King David, who tried to take the throne from his own father? Leave your comment, share this message, like the video, and subscribe to the channel to follow the next content. May God bless your life.